Hey, what up, guys? Real Geek, aka Wicked Specialist here, and I'm here to talk to you today about Symbiote Spider-Man #1 by Peter David and art by Greg Land and Ivan Colo and a couple other fine folks. Jay Leaston and Frank D'Amata did the inks and colors on this one. As a longtime Spider-Man fan, we all have our different favorite eras. One of my favorite eras has always been the black costume era, mainly because it was in the 80s. I grew up in the 80s, and that was the Spider-Man when I was like a real little kid growing up. That was the suit that was looking. That was a badass looking suit. I mean, the black suit, classic Spidey. Also, this later grew on to be Venom, and that is another badass character. But this isn't about Venom. This is about Spider-Man in this black suit. This is a pretty good first issue. Primarily, there are a couple things I do have to address here, and that's probably why I'm doing the video. One, Peter David's always been like a great writer. He's been writing comics for a long time. He did a great run on Hulk in the classic run on Hulk in the 80s, 90s. The classic X Factor government run version from 92 to whatever. He left the book pretty early on, but he established the tone on that book. He also did Spider-Man 2099, the original run. I think he did the new one too, actually, and that's was pretty good. And Scarlet Spider. But this one, it felt like some of the jokes, some of the humor in the book fell flat. I'm like, really? That's what you went with? And one joke in particular, he even stole from the friggin' Lego movie too. Like, and it was a pretty funny joke in the Lego movie too when I saw it. But then to see it here, I'm like, really? You're so much better than that. You were so much better writer than that, Peter David. But the main thing that I want to talk about, and it was so potentially controversial, they even wrote a little editorial in the back about it. Pretty much the entire editorial was going around getting to why they did what they did. That was controversial. There's a sequence in the book in which Spider-Man jumps across two buildings, and it turns out it is the Twin Towers. It's the World Trade Center. And there it is right there. Controversial for me, not so much because, oh no, it's the Twin Towers. That 9/11 was a tragedy. You can't put that in there. But continuity-wise, canon-wise, it doesn't make sense that that should be there, whereas that should not be. I mean, and to do that, we basically have to go and explain Marvel time. Marvel time is different than our time. For example, real-world Spider-Man has been existing since 1962, but in comic time, he's only been doing the Spider-Man thing. The whole Marvel Universe has been the Marvel Universe for roughly about 10, 15 years tops. Like, that's it. And they exist on a sliding time scale, which always slides a little bit backward or forward. I can never quite figure out how exactly it works, but in essence, it keeps time passes in the Marvel Universe, but it's not like it passes here. For example, Franklin Richards is now the son of Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman, Reed and Sue. He's now depicted as like pre-teenager, almost, maybe 14, maybe even 15 even. So that might put the whole Marvel Universe at like maybe 20 years now. In any case, continuity-wise, the Twin Towers, even though they existed in the era that these comics were published in the 80s, and they were drawn in the 80s, so of course it would make sense there. it wouldn't happen in that actual continuity unless unless everything's been going on for longer than I thought, and Spider-Man's actually in his middle-aged, but I don't think so. I'm pretty sure he's still supposed to be maybe 30-ish at the most. Like Peter B. Parker in Into the Spider-Verse is supposed to be the 616 Spider-Man, so that should be the just at the most that age. Like at the most, like around roughly my age. I'm 39, so roughly around there, I suppose, thereabouts. So that just like kind of takes me as a total canon continuity nerd. That's just one of the things that I nerd out about in comics is storyline continuity. Does it all make sense? Does it all flow? And a lot of times it won't, being that each comic when it's written is written in the era that it was written, and it's up to the writers and the later writers to kind of make sense of it and kind of put it together into the big tapestry of continuity that is called the Marvel Universe, that is called fictional history. And that's when it gets a little bit tricky, being that each writer is taking their own stories and then everybody else kind of builds up on top of that, and so on and so on and so on. But like, it should at least make somewhat sense. I mean, I get that in the comics that this era that it originally came out in was the 80s, so they would have the Twin Towers in there, and they do often. But like when I'm rereading those, when I reread that era, in my head, when I'm going through it, it was not. I would just, I don't know, I would explain it away and be a different thing because it wouldn't make sense. But here they basically go ahead and explicitly put it in there, so. And they're saying it's canon. They're saying this is a hidden story of continuity. It's part of the book, part of the history. So I guess visually, again, it makes sense, and I can kind of see it from that aspect, from that way that they were trying to think about it. But, I mean, for me, it just kind of threw me out of it, and then that was like the one stickler, the one little sticky wicket that was just in my head, and I just could not get around that fact. Not, it's funny, it's not for the reason that they thought that it would be controversial, that it would be something that people would want to talk about and discuss. And they were talking about it, 9/11, and that, again, tragic, terrible, really, really. But it just doesn't line up continuity-wise, it doesn't line up story-wise, unless things are happening a lot longer than we thought, or it's just like the visual thing. Well, comics were in the 80s, so, and that's another thing that I really hate. I want to touch on real quick while I still have time on this video. I absolutely hate it when comic books, they go back to the past, to a past era, and then they write and draw and they do references to things that were topical in that time that the comics were published in, because that doesn't make a damn bit of sense whatsoever. It's funny, it's like, I get it, they're looking like they were in the comics back in the 80s, but they shouldn't be making age references, because storyline-wise, that doesn't make sense at all. Like, if you actually try to think it and break it down. And I know comic books, they're supposed to be inherently silly and a little fun, and you can just kind of, fudge away some things. It doesn't have to make sense all the time. But that, to me, to this comic book geek here, that is something that it goes against continuity. Like, it goes against the principles of the story you're trying to set up in the first place. I don't know, maybe I'm just taking it too seriously. That does happen sometimes, but overall, it's a good issue. I'd recommend picking up the series if you're a fan of Spider-Man. I just had that one issue with this one issue. Alright guys, till next time, stay geeky, peace out, peace.